This is the Connected Baby podcast series, sponsored by you, the listener. If you'd like to help spread the message of the science of connection even further, then you can make a donation at connectedbaby.net/donate.
Welcome to the Connected Baby podcast, where we explore how people are putting the science of connection to use in their lives.
Hello, and once again, welcome to Connected Baby, weekly podcast with Dr. Suzanne Zedijk and Gary Robinson. This is our weekly insight into the science of connection. And I'm delighted to say we have another guest with us in the studio today, and Helen Cunningham. Hello, Helen.
Hi.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
And just for the record, Suzanne is with us as well.
Brilliant that Helen is here.
Who'll be interjecting at various parts. Helen, you're here to talk from a mother's point of view.
Yes.
And a mother of three.
That's right,
yes. And twins as well.
The twins were a bit of a surprise. We had our little boy, and then the following year, family were expecting again, which was great, but we hadn't expected it to be twins. So we ended up with 3 children in 2 years. So it's been quite busy around our house.
That might be a little bit of an understatement, quite busy. How have you coped?
To be honest, it has been really hard, but I think it's the twins are 19 months now and our bigger boy is 3, and it is definitely beginning to get a little bit easier. They play together and they get on well together, and it's great. It's wonderful.
And how did you find out about connection and the work in particular of Suzanne?
Oh, gosh. I think actually the first time I was aware of Suzanne's work was when I was expecting Daniel and we were looking for a pushchair. We were trying to decide what pram to buy, and there's always lots of chat on online groups and so on, and about people who are expecting babies always chat to each other, or what are you doing about this and that and the other, and people have been saying about parent-facing prams or prams that face out towards the public, and I thought that's interesting. I think someone at the university where I worked did some research into that, and when I googled and found Suzanne's website, I read up about it and said, right, well, we're going to have to get a parent-facing pram then, because I definitely want my baby to be able to look me in the eye if we're out for a walk. That sounds really important, and we'll be able to chat about everything we see as we wander around. So I thought it sounded a bit obvious that would be a super thing to do. And I went out to try and buy our pram, and we found it was quite difficult actually, because there weren't that many prams that were parent facing. But once we knew the reasons for wanting to get one like that, we hunted high and low and found the right one. And obviously the following year with the twins, it was great because I managed to find the one pram on the market that is for twins, that is parent-facing, and that you can attach a buggy board to for your toddler to stand on as well. And so it's sort of the size of a small family car, and I push it all around town. It's great, and the 4 of us have lovely conversations and chats everywhere we go with this great big pram, and it's great, and it's all because of being able to find a bit of information online from Suzanne's work about why having a parent-facing buggy makes such a difference. All the hours that you spend with your child in a buggy, I think they would be miserable for the child if they weren't able to even see you. I always think how sad it is the child's been splashed with water from a muddy puddle, or they've fallen asleep, or they're uncomfortable, or they're crying, or they're cold or hot, or the sun's in their eyes or something, and the parent, however well-meaning they are, they can't actually see the child, and the child can't see them, and there can't be any communication or connection between them at that time. It's a lot of time that goes by without anything. So.
And one of the things that's interesting about buggies is it's a perfect example of where the science of connection could be helpful to all of us in thinking about children's experiences. But there's very little research done on it. And that one piece that you're talking about, Helen, that I did, was very controversial when it came out. And yet it seems like it's the sort of thing that parents would really like to know about.
It's such a no-brainer. As soon as you mention it to a pregnant woman, they go, oh gosh, right, okay, well, I'll look for one of those then.
But it isn't something that the science had thought much about, and that buggy manufacturers don't know much about, and yet that will be shaping children's brain development, and it's not something we think about.
Can I ask why it was controversial? Because to me, when you explain it to me, and when Helen talks about it, it seems like complete and utter common sense.
The reason it became really controversial is because of the way the press covered it. So we did a study with the National Literacy Trust, trying to see if we could find any evidence about how the direction that a buggy faces, if that changed children's experience and parents' behavior toward them. Nobody else had asked that. And when the National Literacy Trust put a report out about it, I think it sounded so silly and so off the wall amongst all the many things that parents have to worry about, that the press treated it as a bit of a joke. And then when it made it into the papers, parents got defensive because of the way the story was covered, which is one of the reasons that I think it's really important to think about how we present this science so that parents don't feel guilty, overwhelmed. They've got enough things to worry about. This science should help them, not add more.
Exactly. I think parents feel so guilty so easily. And if someone's expecting their second child and you say to them, I've got an old parent-facing buggy that we don't need anymore, but do you have any use for them? And they will immediately get defensive and say, well, our first child didn't have one, I didn't know about that then. And they've come out absolutely fine and so on. And you feel like you've stepped on toes and criticised their parenting first time around. It's not like that at all. It's just like this is a useful wee tool that can shortcut your eye contact here.
This happens all the time. We start to hear about the science and then people get nervous, they get anxious, they feel guilty, they get defensive. I totally get that. So one of the reasons for Connected Baby is to see if we can explore ways by people telling their stories, like Helen's story of parenting, to help them to think more about the science and not feel bad about it.
Let's explore then, Helen, a little bit more about your parenting journey. One son and a set of twins. People, I imagine, will say, oh, cool, you've got your hands full. You know, what's the hardest thing about bringing up maybe 3 children in such close, proximity in terms of their age and their years and so on? But let's turn that on its head. What's been the most joyful thing for you?
Just seeing the bond that they have with each other, I think. And it was really important to my husband to try and make sure that our children grew up close with each other. We're older parents and we wanted our children to have siblings that they would grow up close to and always having there in life and so on. And they're a real cohesive little unit. They're quite sweet with each other now. Of course, obviously they bash each other over the head with things now and again because they are just little. But I mean, they're really sweet to each other, really kind. And yesterday when I was putting the twins down for a nap, I'd changed both their nappies and they'd got their little snuggly blankets that they nap with, and they were playing on the floor next to me while I was just tidying up their room. And they put their little blankets together and they'd lain down snuggled up on the floor with their heads on their blankets, and Tommy was stroking Layla's hair and Layla was giggling, and then they were just cuddled up together. And I just thought, this is what makes it all worth it. They can bash each other over the head with their toys a bit if they want to, but when it comes to it, they're tired and it's nap time and they've had their lunch and they've had their nappy changed and they're comfy and cosy, they just snuggle up together, and it's the loveliest thing. It's great.
And has it been a steep learning curve for you and your partner?
Very much. Very much. Yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to begin to say how hard it's been for us. As I say, we were older parents, and we I think both of us had probably reached a point where we thought maybe we wouldn't have children, and to have ended up with 3 in 2 years was just mental. And both of us, our lives have changed so completely. I've gone from having a big career to being a full-time stay-at-home mum. I just simply couldn't manage to return to work after having the twins as well, and 3 of them all preschool age. And so the difference in every possible way in terms of our income, my sense of identity. Who am I now? I'm no longer this person that does this job. I'm not. I'm a mummy at home, and the sort of things that we do at weekends. It's all about how to manage all these children and to keep the household running, and to try and carve out little bits of time for ourselves. And the sort of hobbies that I have are no longer, sort of world travel and triathlon. It's all about sort of gardening and cooking, tidying up. No, that's not right. I mean, I do get bits of time to myself, but it's hard. Your whole life, the whole focus of everything changes, and your whole sense of identity. And I think, actually, it's fair to say, I think that while women probably bear the brunt of that initially, and really have the burden of it all at first, I think the men, they totally change their sense of identity as well. But no one sort of expects it, notices it, asks how they're doing, is there for them. I think that's quite hard for men too.
Suzanne, can I ask you a question just while we're on the subject of fathers? Has the role of the father changed over the past decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. I'll tell you why I ask. I see a lot more fathers on the street being more involved with their children, even carrying them, and seem to be doing a lot more than, I'll say my father did back in 30 years, 35 years ago, whatever it happened to be. There seems to be a lot more connection with fathers and their children. Have you found that that's something that's a recent happening?
Well, certainly it's one of the things that some scientists have looked at. Have they tried to trace the journey of fatherhood, which of course is then tied to masculinity. So, and well, you've just said it's shifting. So yes, it does seem to be shifting, but that ties into more minute experiences. Like, what is that only on the street that's happening, or is that actually happening in homes as well? There was a study just out that said men who help with childcare get better sex. Okay, so that's a new piece of research. You could describe that in lots of other ways, but it's probably put that way by the press as a way of trying to help the men to be interested in those findings. But that's kind of common sense, isn't it? If you're weighed down with the care of children and you have a husband who's really interested in that, well, the partner likes him more, and if you like somebody more, then you get more sex. I mean, that's kind of common sense, but it's interesting to have the research confirming it.
There'll be fathers reaching for prams all over the world.
I know.
Excellent.
I'm going to have a revolution here.
I think one of the very important things about these podcasts is about sharing. And there might be a parent-to-be or parents-to-be listening to this at the moment. And while we talked about some of the more joyous occasions of having 3 children, what's been a personal struggle for you that somebody might identify with while they listen to this? It's a very personal question.
Yeah, it is. I think that the old sort of thing of parental guilt, of always kind of feeling you're bad because this, that and the other, and every parent seems to feel terribly guilty about something or other. And I always the thing that makes me feel guilty is if I feel like I haven't done things right by my child at some point. One of the things about having twins, for example, is especially when they were really tiny, I'd be feeding one of them and the other one would wake up and start crying, and I would just have to sit there with tears pouring down my face, feeling absolutely just like the most lousy parent in the world, letting one child happily finish their feed while the other one sobbed on the other side of the room in a Moses basket or something. And it just breaks your heart. It just makes you feel absolutely dreadful, and it shatters any image that you might have had that you were doing well as a parent, or that you knew what you were doing, or that you were coping okay, and it just makes you feel terrible. And the next day things might just go really well and you think, actually I've got quite a good handle on this, and then you have a bad day again and you think, why do people leave me alone with these children? I can't do this at all.
Does it get better?
It gets better, I think, because what as a mum I did, and I think a lot of mums and probably dads too, tend to do, is find some like-minded souls out there in the world at the playgroups and at the parks and say, oh, it was awful yesterday and this happened and that happened and I don't really know how to deal with it. And the other mum says, yeah, that happened to me, and what I did was such and such and that seemed to work, maybe you could try that. And you have such a bond with that person because you've admitting where you think you might be a lousy parent is just like the biggest, worst, the hardest, what you feel is the baddest thing about yourself. And somehow it's when you've got other mums in the same situation to confide in, and they understand, and and they can give you ideas, it really strengthens you. And the more information you have about things, the more you know about stuff, the more ideas are shared and opinions are shared. I mean, online forums are a great thing because you get lots of mums quite able to, because there's this like anonymity of them, I suppose, mums can sort of say this, that and the other. Some of them are really supportive in the twins forums, especially incredibly supportive, because it's such an intense experience. But I think the way parents will always group together and stand up for each other, the sort of League of Adults, League of Parents in the world, is great.
So there's several things about connection in just that little bit that you're saying, right? One is parents want to be perfect, but children don't actually want perfect parents.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
So the science tells us that the most important thing is where you get something mismatched. If it distresses the child, that's when they need a support and cuddle, and you make up. So children don't need perfect parents. They just need parents who are able to tune in, especially when something has distressed the child. Another thing that you're saying is parents need support. You just need to tell somebody what's hard. And your body shifts. I think it's amazing. The physiology of your body changes when someone else listens to you. So where there are lots of programs that can cost money in the country for, say, parenting programs, if we had more possibility for people to listen to parents for what is hard, because raising kids is exhausting and hard. Helen's already said that. Just listening changes your body and you calm down, and then you can be there for your child. So let's just have more listening possibilities in the country. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the attachment book that affected you.
Another bit of connection.
Fair to say, quite a bit, Helen. The title of the book is?
Saber-toothed Tigers and Teddy Bears, The Connected Baby Guide to Attachment.
And it's available.
Yes,
through
it's
you.
one
We
of
can
the resources that we produce.
And you are quoted. Not many people in this world are quoted on the back of books, I have to say, Helen, but you're quoted as saying, reading this book was amazing. It felt like Suzanne was explaining to me what my baby can't say himself.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. Quite near the beginning of the book, there was a section, and I had only had my first little boy at the time, and he was about 8 months old and just on the brink of learning to crawl, I think. And he was really clingy, really insanely clingy. And I think a lot of parents would identify with that. When you've got a clingy child, it's just really hard work. They won't let you out of the room. They won't let you out of their sight. Sometimes they just won't let you out of arm's length. And you just wanted to go across to him and put the kettle on, and you've got this screaming, sobbing wreck of a child. You feel terrible because you've upset them so much. And I was kind of going through that at the time when I read Suzanne's book, and it was just a revelation. It talked about from the baby's point of view what clinginess is and what it feels like and what causes it and stuff. And where I was beginning to find Daniel's clinginess just very, very draining and very wearying. And I was thinking, oh, come on, I give everything to my child. I'd give them everything of my heart and soul. Why are they torturing me? Why is he torturing me like this? And then I read the book, and it said basically, I mean, as a mother, you have all sorts of biological sort of pulls and draws on you. You see your child crawl towards the curb on the road, and nothing could stop you from reaching over and grabbing your child. You see your child about to topple a bookshelf over on top of themselves, you will throw yourself in the way. Your brain doesn't get in the way. You have these physical impulses to protect your child, to care for your child, and so on. And what I began to understand from reading what Suzanne had written was that my child was also experiencing such strong biological pulls as well. And when Daniel was screaming and sobbing because I'd got up and walked away across the room, walked away from him, it was, from the title of the book, The Saber-toothed Tiger, it was a sort of cave baby instinct from him that, he was on the brink of learning to crawl. He was beginning to reach the point where he could, for the first time, get away from his mother, just crawl off into the middle distance, and he would get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, and he wouldn't be safe anymore, and he wouldn't be fed anymore, and he wouldn't be nurtured and looked after, and he wouldn't survive. And he had this total inbuilt biological instinct that if he thought I was about to walk away out of his sight, he would cry with that absolute pitch in his cry that made every one of my nerve endings tingle and made me come back and pick him up, because I couldn't bear that sound in his voice because it was so irritating and annoying. But he'd fine-tuned it, and he was my child, and he knew that umbilical cord had carried some message. He knew what pitch to cry at to make me come and pick him up again. And I may have picked him up out of love and out of frustration and out of annoyance and out of all sorts of things, but I did come back and pick him up every single time. And after reading from Suzanne what was going on in Daniel's head when he did that, when he wouldn't let me go out of the room, when he wouldn't let me go to the bathroom, when he wouldn't let me put the kettle on without him being there, then I suddenly understood, and I thought, gosh, how awful for him when I just skip out of the room anyway and think, well, I'll be back in a moment. And instead I just started leaving the bathroom door open or bringing him with me if I went to put the kettle on and so on. And he calmed down so much. And I just thought how awful if he was having that strong biological urge to not let me out of his sight, and I was continually walking out of his sight and distressing him. But once I knew a little bit about it, I'd read the book, then, oh gosh, it made it so much easier.
And this book isn't, a big war and peace.
No, it's a sort of a little leaflety book type thing.
It's a leaflety book, actually.
But it sounds like you almost, by reading it, you instantaneously had a light bulb moment, and
it was a revelation.
Everything came to.
I felt like
right.
it. Well, just as I said on the thing that you quoted earlier, if Daniel could have actually spoken to me at 8 months old, this is what he would have said. Mum, I have this biological pull. I cannot let you out of my sight. It's so distressing for me. It's so upsetting for me if you go away from me. So bring me with you. And he can't say that, but Suzanne could write this in a leaflet for me to read,
That's what I think is amazing about understanding this science. You don't have to understand it all. You don't have to have any fancy scientific words. If you get the key ideas, which is what you did, it can change your behavior. I mean, I was over the moon when Helen wrote to say what a difference it had made. And it's kind of striking to realize we've had 75 years of attachment research. So attachment research starts in the 1940s. And yeah, a lot of it hasn't reached parents. That would help in these really little but major ways if you just change the way you respond to a crying baby. The crying stops. I mean, the crying decreases. It made Helen's life easier as well as the baby's life easier. I think that's amazing that a little tiny bit of science can help you do that.
Helen, when you were going through your pregnancy, and indeed when you'd given birth, had you been given any advice or help? Had anybody in any medical profession given you any indication or talked to you about the science of connection?
No, I don't think so.
Is it something you found out yourself?
Yeah. I think it was.
So,
and even, that's interesting, even if somebody had talked about attachment, you can't remember them talking about attachment.
No.
So if they did, it isn't something that stuck in your head. That's fascinating.
Yeah, no, I don't remember. I mean, when you're pregnant, I do remember, especially the second time around pregnancy, second time I was pregnant, I remember thinking how funny it was that you go along and they do things like they measure your blood pressure and they take a tape measure to measure from your belly button up to the your rib cage or something. I used to think, but they're doing this, but I felt like I was in on the secret of what it was like to be a parent by then because I already had a child. But I remember kind of just giggling about, I'm going to have a baby, right? Okay, well, you don't need to be prepared for parenthood. What you need is to have your belly button measured or something.
And the services, no health services are trying to keep it a secret. There's just something about the way that our services are organized that often they're not serving some of the key needs that parents often...
Well, you talked very interestingly before we started this recording about a thing called a bounty pack.
Oh, yeah, bounty
right?
packs. Now, I wasn't actually lucky enough to receive a bounty pack when I left hospital.
This is common practice, by the way, isn't
Yes,
it?
tell folks what a bounty pack
bounty
is.
pack, apparently, I don't know, I didn't get one. But anyway.
not that it's grating on you, you don't hold a grudge.
At all. I wanted that free, nappy or whatever it was. But anyway, yeah, they're full of like adverts for the, newborn baby photographers and all this sort of thing. And there's a sample of a nappy and a sample of some cream to put on your baby's bottom and stuff so that you'll go out and buy all these products yourself afterwards when you come out of your, haze of just giving birth. And I think, most people sort of say, it's like when these photographers come around the maternity ward themselves and give you leaflets as well. And they're getting you when you're probably the most vulnerable you will ever be in your entire life, and you've just given birth to this gorgeous baby, and they're saying, "Oh, your baby's pretty. We'd like to hand over your life savings, and I'll take a couple of photos." And it's like, oh, okay. And you kind of think, well, why do bounty packs not contain? I mean, people always complain that their baby didn't come with a manual. Well, why is the bounty pack not containing a few of these sort of leaflets about how to cope with it when your child cries, how to understand when your child follows you from room to room, how to understand what's going on in your baby's head, how to find ways to connect in a really positive way with your child. Maybe bounty packs could be a great way, but I suppose you need someone to fund it. And if the NHS is sending mums out of hospital with a bunch of adverts for sort of materialised products, all sorts of things that they maybe don't really need, maybe they could also just slip in some useful, some stuff about how to understand your child. Maybe they would like to fund something like that. That would be really good. It would have been great to have left hospital with some good information on how to bond with my baby.
And I think many people, including health people, will be surprised to hear that there are parents who don't feel that they got that information. And maybe in some areas they have given that information. But if a parent can't remember it and therefore can't act on it, then we're not giving it effectively. And this lets us start to ask interesting questions about how do we get this information to parents so that they can relax in parenting.
This is a worldwide podcast, but let's just talk about the UK for just a second. Is there a hesitancy, do you think, Suzanne, within the NHS to adopt this?
Oh, hesitancy. Right. A lot of this information wasn't known 10 years ago, which is why I'm excited about it, because we've got a lot more knowledge about connection than we used to, especially the impact on brain development. Some of it we've had for, like I said earlier, 75 years. And some of the impact on brains is relatively new. And some of it changes practice. So health visitors now often have difficult conversations about what advice should they give to parents. So do you let a baby sleep through the night? Do you pick up a baby when they cry? Do you pressure mothers to breastfeed? Or is it okay to bottle feed? How do you go about weaning? All of these are questions of connection, even though they may sound like they're something else, because it sounds like they're about sleeping or feeding. Those are connection. That is attachment. So as new information appears and we have new scientific insights, how do we make use of that? Sometimes it has quite a major impact on the advice you would give for practice. So I think that's part of what goes on, is that professionals may not have had time to catch up with the new science and to think through how that changes the advice you'd give.
Helen, in the first podcast a couple of weeks ago, we spoke about the hesitancy of some nurseries, not all, but some nurseries, to hold and cuddle children that might be in distress. Now, if you decide at some point in the future that the twins and your son are going into nursery to allow you to go back to work, would you expect a nursery worker to be able to pick up your child in distress and give them a cuddle, or would you have issue with that?
I'm horrified at the thought that a nursery worker wouldn't cuddle a distressed child. That's just such an awful thought.
And this does happen.
It absolutely happens. In fact, there have been government ministers that have spoken about the need to reduce the anxiety about cuddling. So if ministers are talking about cuddling, that means it's reaching some wider awareness. And I think we need to be talking, because Helen's clearly wants her children to be cuddled. There are other parents who are more nervous about that. And they're nervous because they wonder, are the staff really reliable? Could abuse be going on? Or they worry, if a staff member cuddles my child a lot, will my child love them more than they love me? So there are all sorts of unconscious worries that can go on with cuddling that we don't think about and talk about when we're making decisions about practice, that we need to, because children need cuddle. The science tells us that very clearly, in order to feel safe, because that's what keeps you safe from the saber-toothed tigers that Helen was talking about.
Helen, we like to start and end the podcasts with everything to do with connection and attachment. As a can I call you an experienced parent now? I think after three...
So it's been 3.5 years. At what point when do you get your medal?
And when do you get your sleep?
Well,
I suppose more to the point.
What is this sleep you speak of?
But parents that are listening, or indeed parents to be, what would you say is probably the most important part for you and your partner? What's the most important lesson with regard to connection that you've both learned, and what would you like to pass on? What, if there was a connection legacy that you can pass on in this podcast, what would it be?
Oh gosh, just no parent feels like they've no parent ever feels like they've got it all right, and just don't worry so much, and just cuddle your baby lots and stay close to them. And it's not one little tiny thing that you get right or wrong. It's the whole thing altogether. You know, some people feel like, oh, I didn't manage to breastfeed, therefore there's always going to be this thing that my child missed out on. Complete nonsense, you know. If you got 66 other things right, don't worry about one thing that you got wrong, you know. I don't care if your pram faced the wrong way, if you rocked your baby lots and loved them, you know. You can't sort of get it wrong. It's just all trying to pick up new ideas of getting confident in the things that you're getting right, and, you know, just don't feel guilty all the time. Just enjoy it and love your children.
I think it's amazing when you can take really deep, important science, and when it gets translated, it becomes relax, cuddle your children, have a good time together. That is actually what the science is telling us, but somehow that seems almost too simple. The science is telling us to relax and have fun with our kids, and Helen gets it. And that helps parents to relax. I want the science to help us relax, not make us feel more nervous.
Helen, thank you for joining us today and being so open and sharing. And I think it's opportune to say as well that Saber-toothed Tigers and Teddy Bears, the book that affected you greatly, is available on the Connected Baby website as well, along with lots of other stuff as well. But please do take a look at it, and I take it recommended reading.
Absolutely, I think it's great. And it's a short, easy read that you can do when you don't get much sleep.
Wonderful. Helen Cunningham, mum of 3, and Dr. Suzanne Ziedyk, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for coming, Helen.
Thank you for having me.
This was a GRC production for Connected Baby.